Right, so most of my personal system is developed around never having to start a fire. You have to understand that if you're starting a fire in this type of situation, especially in a non-permissive environment, fire is one of the best survival signals out there. So the reason it's one of the best survival signals out there is because you're putting off a lot of light, and it contrasts between the light and the smoke against a variety of different backgrounds. And it has an olfactory aspect to it. It can be smelled for a long distance away. So what makes it a great signal makes it probably not a good idea for you unless you absolutely have to in a non-permissive environment during some sort of a bug out type scenario when you're just trying to get from point A to point B without drawing attention to yourself. With that said, you know, there are ways to kind of make a more stealthy fire to kind of reduce the amount of light that it's putting out, reduce the amount of smoke, and that technique is often referred to as the Dakota fire pit. And what it does is basically put the fire, it takes it from the surface and puts it below ground. That kind of hides some of the light, kind of masks it a little bit. And then typically if it's in an open field, you know, you would want to have branches overhead that are going to dissipate the smoke to kind of reduce that signature a little bit. I like to do them just inside the forest personally so that I have natural trees over the top of it. That'll dissipate the smoke. By the time it gets up above the tree line, then there's a lot less signature to worry about. The other consideration when you're using a Dakota fire pit is, aside from cold weather environments where you absolutely have to have this for core temperature control, this is kind of a real quick down and dirty, do what you need to do, and then put it out and cover your tracks kind of thing. So I would never put my Dakota fire pit and do the business that I need to do at the Dakota fire pit near my shelter location, okay? I'm going to stop short of where I want to actually put my shelter. And in this case, this place I chose because I actually want to set my shelter up behind me where I'm at right now. So before getting up in there, I want to do all this displacement and put off this light, and you know, anything that might draw attention to me, I want that attention to be drawn to here. And then hopefully by the time anybody, you know, that is tracking me or following me gets up here, I've already cleared this out as best I could, and I'm long away from here. It's not something I'm going to sit and hang around. But you know, I carry a water filter, so the chances of me having to stop every time I need to boil water to dig a Dakota fire pit, and then take the time of digging it correctly so that I can put everything back in place as best as possible, is pretty slim. But it could happen. My filter could get clogged, could get lost, could get broken, and I'm down to boiling, which is why I carry a stainless steel. So that's part of my pace plan for water disinfection. And you know, there are some instances where this is going to be necessary for your body core temperature. So you know, if you need to, and you need to quickly thaw yourself out or dry yourself out and then move on, or locate this near your shelter, then that's your plan, your situation. So the key things to this is that you have a main hole, if you will, your Dakota fire hole, Dakota fire pit, that's about the size of a 1 gallon paint can. You think of it that size. And then you have a vent hole that is upwind that is actually allowing that to draft. And once it's drafting properly, you'll have a lot less smoke. In this case, it's been raining here for a couple of days. So everything's kind of wet. So there's a good chance that because it's wet, I'm going to have more smoke than usual, but that's okay. I'm in the forest, there's lots of branches to dissipate that smoke. When you're creating a fire in this pit, you know, it's a very efficient fire pit. It only takes a very small fuel, so you spend less time gathering. And again, this fire is not that big of a priority. It's something that I'm doing really quickly to maybe boil up some water, maybe cook a food source that I found really quick, so that I have something to eat, and then I'm going to move away from it after covering it up as best I can. But those are kind of some of the considerations that I want you to think about. So I would do my pit here. I would cover it up as best I could. I would continue to move along my route, and then I would do a 90-degree dog leg and another 90-degree, and I would come back, and basically I'm going to come back and set up well above this rock outcropping to where I can actually see where this was. That's just a series of dog legs to end up coming back on my own tracks. And the reason I do that is if this draws someone's attention, they're going to be following me along a trail. They get to here, there's a lot of displacement that stops them. And by displacement, I mean, you know, I've moved things from their natural place. So as they're down here or following along here, they would pick up my trail and continue to move that way, but I'm actually right behind them observing the whole thing. So I've got some decisions to make at that point. I can handle that based on the information I have at the time, but at least they're not going to surprise me because I'm able to watch this location. But to dig the main hole, if Dakota fire pit and boiling water frequently is something that you plan to do quite often, you know, it may be worth adding a shovel to your baseline kit. It makes digging these and filling these back in a lot easier, but you can get away with just a simple digging stick, depending on the ground that you're digging in. So practice these before you ever need them and decide, you know, what's best for you if you plan to use this type of technique. I'm gonna grab a quick digging stick. I'm gonna dig me out a main fire pit right here, and then I'll put a vent hole in there and we'll get going. All right, for a digging stick, it's basically exactly like it sounds. It's just a hardwood stick, not a dead stick, that is sharpened on the ends, and it's useful for digging. All right, so I'm gonna dig this out, get rid of the debris. If this wasn't so wet, I would take the time, I would probably lay my poncho out, and everything that I took off, I would put on the poncho so that I can put it back as close to natural as possible. This is all wet and muddy and chewed up, so I don't think it'll make that much of a difference. And again, I'm also going to be doglegging to look back down on this area to kind of mitigate anyone that's following me. But I'm just going to dig this out as best I can. And with a stick, you know, it's easiest to just kind of break it up and pull it out with your hands. And this part takes a little time. And I don't want to just throw this dirt everywhere because I've got to put it back in the hole when I'm done with it. So I want to kind of keep track of it a little bit. And stacking it up around what I'm going to consider the front side also gives me a little more height to hide the light. But for a lot of places, it's just a matter of breaking it up with the stick and digging it out with your hands. Be set free. Starting to get about the depth I want it.
Sister said now, don't you hurt me.
All right, that's pretty good. I'm down into the clay.
Brother took my penny from me. With a try, so not true. You got to give of your heart if you want to. You got to give of your heart if you want to. You got to give.
So that's pretty good. I'm down into the clay. It's about the size of a gallon paint can, so I'm pretty happy with that. I hit a pretty large rock here that is just going to have to be part of the bottom of the fire pit. It'll be okay, because that is not coming out anytime soon. So I've got, basically, imagine setting a paint can down inside here. That's about the size that you need. Now I've got to kind of check the prevailing winds because I want the vent hole to be just upwind, and it feels like the wind is basically coming straight down through here and going across this way. So I want my vent hole to kind of follow that along the wind and take advantage of that draft. My vent hole, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can dig straight down about 6 to 8 inches away from the edge of your hole. You can dig straight down and then tunnel across. But I've found that it's easiest to just take your digging stick and drive it through the ground at an angle, and I want the end of the stick to come out right in the basically the bottom of that. So that's typically the way that I'll do it. And I'll find a good spot, take my digging stick, and just start kind of burrowing out a hole without breaking this little bridge. All right. If you do break the bridge, you can fix it, but your goal is to keep it intact, because you're wanting to create kind of a rocket stove effect. Push it in a little further, kind of bore that hole out a little. Watch for your stick to come through the other side. There we go. Making that vent hole a little larger. I'll kind of pack that a little bit so it doesn't collapse, but I've still got my bridge intact here. And then this kind of poke through. So I'll pull all that debris out of there. And I'll clean up that vent hole from the inside. Just to make sure I've got a good draft and this is venting nicely. All right, that's pretty good. Yeah. All right, so just to make this as quick as possible, and because it has been raining, I've got some cedar bark tinder, but it's extremely wet. So just to make it quick, I'll use one of the mini infernos, because this is going to take the ignition source rather quickly. It should burn long enough to dry that out and get that going, then I can add some sticks. The goal with this is to have as small a fire as possible, but a rather efficient fire. But if this doesn't work, if this doesn't burn long enough, I also have candles that will provide heat for longer than even this will. So I'll probably go ahead and put a little tinder on the bottom, kind of the more wet stuff. And save a little dry for on top. With these, I'm just going to break it apart and kind of expose some of that fuzzy cotton, release that accelerant that these are soaked in. And then it should not take long at all to get it going. Get some of this dry stuff on top of that. But I don't want to smother it out. I want it to have a chance to dry and catch. It's not very encouraging when they don't snap. So what I want to do with this basically now is get this going. It's a very wet day, so it's stubborn, so I've got to kind of slowly feed this in. It looks like the wind's changed a little as well, so I'm going to shift. My goal is to get a little bed of coals going here and get these flames nice and low. And with this, I'm going to cut some green sticks and I'm going to lay those across the top and make a grill. I could kind of use that, if I wanted, I could use that to cook whatever I needed to cook on that really quick. Or I can make something that I can set a water bottle on and boil it real quick. So I'm going to keep feeding this and trying to nurse it. And again, it's got to burn long enough to dry this material out for it to catch. But it looks like it's venting pretty well. The air is actually coming in through here and hitting the base of that fire and pushing it up. And there's a lot of smoke because it's so wet. But again, I'm inside the forest, so that's all dissipating before it really leaves the canopy, which is good. But once this gets going really well, it doesn't take a lot of sticks. It doesn't take a lot of large fuel, so you don't have to spend too much time gathering things up. So I'm just going to keep feeding it. Little bits at a time. As long as the flame is above the last bit of fuel I put on there, then it's safe to add more fuel. But again, with this one, my goal is to keep a very low profile. I don't want real big roaring flames, which, you know, would be helpful for the dried material, or to dry out the material that I'm using, but you know, it just kind of goes against what we're trying to do here. But I think it's getting pretty well established now. I'll let that all dry out and catch and burn down a little bit, and I'll start adding slightly larger fuel. I'm going to try to find some dry stuff though. So I've got kind of a bed of coals established here, and you know, it's not burning exactly as efficiently as it could if the wood were dry, but that's okay. That's what we got to work with. And our main point is to get it going to where it's sustainable and use it as quickly as possible and move on. So I'm just going to set up a grate, basically kind of a grill that I've just cut some green sticks here, and more or less depends on what you're using it for. All right, so I want to put my heaviest duty sticks kind of in the middle because I'm actually using it. Woo, it's getting me. I'm actually using it to hold the weight of the water bottle. It might be a little short. That one will work. Try to get those even. Because the last thing I want to do is spill my water bottle in there. And once you get that set up, nice and even, of course, take your lid off. Find a good balance point. Or you could build a tripod over top of this. So find a good sweet spot here.